If it's not good enough, it's not good enough. You know, drop the ego, work harder. One of my favorite phrases is people by people, not ideas.
Hello everyone, welcome back to part 2 of the World of Work podcast together with Gareth Worthington. In this episode, we continue to talk about, why settle for only one profession if you can embrace multiple ones at the same time. And Gareth is a great example of that. I mean, very polyhedric background and professional, trained marine biologist, PhD in endocrinology, recently completed an EMBA. His background is in medical affairs and in medical writing. He's also, amongst other things, author of science fiction books. And the conversation continues as we talk about how does someone know whether what they're passionate about is a hobby or whether it can actually turn into a profession. So let's tune into the conversation.
Circumstance is different, right? It doesn't help. Not everyone has the ability to be able to be as diverse. It's very circumstance dependent, right? I'm lucky in the profession I have. I earn enough that I can do my other hobbies. Some people have to do 2 jobs to support their family, and they don't have the extra time. So it's very dependent. I didn't always. I had to work to get where I am. I grew up very poor in the poor part of the UK. So it took a long time for me to get to the point in my life that I could do everything that I want to do. But now I'm here. I'm making sure I do it.
Mm-hmm. So. And you used the word hobby just a second ago. And so I do want to talk about that a second, because there are many people out there that have many interests, many talents, many passions, and many hobbies. So they could be writers, they could be painters, they could be X number of things, N number of things. What do you think? And how do you know, by the way? So what do you think makes the difference between being quote unquote hobbyist, amateur in a given field?
Yeah.
Could be in writing and painting, etc. And then making that shift into saying, now I'm going to move and pivot from taking it as a hobby to taking it as a profession. Because I think quite a few folks can resonate with, everything that you're saying and we're talking about. But many have a doubt and maybe say, am I even good enough to take it to that next level? What is it for you that makes that difference between?
It depends what your end goal is. So for many people, it's money. And for me, it's not. So and I think that's the difference. So I have my primary job, and that allows me to live. And that's the difference. Live, work to live, not live to work. And, then a lot of people want to become a writer because they want to make money from it. I became a writer because I wanted to leave something behind. So no one's going to get to the, when I die, no one's going to say he was an amazing pharma exec. No one's going to care what I did for a job. I love my job and I help people, and we help people with cancer, and that's amazing. But me as an individual, no one's going to say he was a great pharma exec. That's just not what they're going to say. But they'll say I'm a good dad, or they'll say anything else. And my books for me are something that are like a legacy. When I'm gone, my kids get to take them and say, hey, Dad wrote this book, and their grandkids get to read them and understand their great granddad a little bit, and whatever. It's just, so for me, it's about how seriously you take something. A hobby is, I like to play a bit of football, whereas taking it that step further is, I want to be the best I can be at that thing. And then it's not a hobby anymore. Then it's more pushing me in the direction of, not necessarily a profession, but taking things a lot more seriously. You can go professional and then make money from it if that's what you want to do. But it's not my end goal.
Also, because it's a very difficult industry to make money in. I mean, I don't know too much about publishing, but if I look into the entertainment in general, or music, it's a very crowded space.
Yeah, it is.
As well. I mean, everybody's writing. By the way, everybody's writing nowadays.
And that's the thing, right? So, I mean, Amazon changed the face of publishing forever because it introduced the ability to self-publish very easily. And so you have a swath of people who love to write, and they love to do it. They're not very good, and they get to write and put a book out, and that's great. But they then, sell those books either for free, they give them away for free, or they sell them at 99 cents. And there's thousands, it's like 5 million books on Amazon. So then I spend 2 years writing a book, and I pay for a developmental editor, and then, a line editor, and a copy editor, and a proofreader, and design. 2 years of my life, and then someone expects me to sell it for 99 cents, and that's not the same.
No.
So it's a very difficult industry to be in. So I've taken money out of the equation. For me, it's legacy. I enjoy it. I love to do it. Leave something behind, and I want to be the best I can be at it.
But you go nonetheless through the full process. So you do work with copy editors and
Yeah,
other folks
absolutely.
in your team to really make that book
The best it
come
can
to life.
be. Yeah.
Okay. So that is already taking it beyond, I would say,
Yeah.
the amateur and the hobby, because that's for me already a little bit the tipping point. It's not
Yeah.
even so much, let's say, the revenue that comes into it, because that's so difficult to predict.
Yeah.
I mean, all of a sudden you could become like a top star overnight,
Yeah.
which I do wish you probably already are, by the way.
Really not, but that's okay.
but if that's what you wish to do, absolutely. But I think what also shifts the amateur to the professional is this taking it to a level where you're competing, quote unquote, in the big league, with other authors who
Yeah.
do this from A to Z, following the full-fledged professional process. Like in music, it would be, going to a studio, working with a producer, working with top-notch musicians, going to a mastering studio professionally, and then, coming up, having an agent or somebody to support you in the marketing and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's about competing with yourself, doing better than last time. So my writing has vastly improved from my very first book to now in the space of 6 years or so. Greatly improved. I work with some good editors who show me better ways of doing things, better ways of writing. It's about being better, and that makes you a professional. Being better every day. My co-author and I, we work together, and we're kind of brutal. We just say that doesn't work. It's rubbish. Get rid of it. Cut it. And especially writers can get quite precious about what they write. They love their paragraph, and I want to keep my paragraph. And I think Stephen King said, "Kill your darlings." If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You spend 3 hours on it. I don't care. It doesn't work. Get rid of it.
And how do you manage the frustrations? Because I know a little bit about the creative process, so it can be a little bit frustrating. Not only like you spend a lot of time on thinking of the paragraph, the chapter, or the idea, but then having to ditch it or start over again. How do you deal with that?
You got to get rid of ego, and that's been one of the good things about working with Stu. Is this kind of like we say ego doesn't come into it. Our favorite quote to each other is, "The facts don't care about your feelings." And so if it's not good enough, it's not good enough. Drop the ego, work harder. And that's kind of how you got to do it. So it can be. It does. It's not. It is hard. You do feel a bit gutted, but when you get to the other side of it, you realize that it really is better.
It's
you really
better that
need
way.
that.
Yeah. I think that sense of self-realization is really very important, and I'm kind of wondering how that may inform your other professional side. How these two that may seem very different paradigms, or these different, and they are different professions. What's the red thread for you? Like, what's the connecting point, if at all?
For me, people, and this is not meant as a criticism. It's everybody does it, including myself. You can become quite myopic in a profession because you work in medical affairs, in pharma, 20 years. That's what you know. That's what you do. What I see in many companies is they try and reform, and they just look at themselves. How can we rehash this thing? Or they'll look to people that kind of do what they do as well. They'll look to another pharma company and say, well, look what they're doing. And a really good example where I changed that up is a few years ago, we had to change something very large in one of the companies I worked for. And I asked for money, and I said, I'm going to go away and I'm going to go look at BMW. I'm going to look at IBM, at Apple, at Shell Oil. I want to understand how they do it. I don't want to look at my industry. I want to look at other people's industries. Mm-hmm. And you see a different mindset of things. It's a different way of thinking. And so I try and bring that always as much as I can into my daily profession, because sometimes it's good to be external. It's good to look outside. and see what else that there is out there that you can pull in. And so that creativity does bleed in some places.
Yeah. But I think we still have quite a way to go. I kind of sense people are readier than companies. Having been in the guts of an organization myself, and I kind of know how that operates, I do see that the intentions are there, and they're actually very good intentions. But sometimes it's just it's the change process is slow because the structure overall sometimes is so heavy that it does not allow enough room for experimenting on different ways of thinking and looking. And then there's some other things too, I think, which are more linked to some other organizational, let's say, dynamics that occur inside companies. But one of the things that are going to be part of the season, but also in general of this world of work, is moving away from verticalities and the ways we typically look at careers, which is by industrial sectors, it's vertical, right? Career ladders, we even use the word ladders, it's vertical. And the world is shifting into much more, cross dimensions, cross disciplines. You may have Google that may be eating the lunch out of the pharma at some stage, just simply out of the full data that they're getting, and they're also getting into that space. So technology is so disruptive that also these industries that are kind of like a bit older and traditional, they're going to need to embrace a different way of looking at it and look into different professions as well.
It also depends how things are pitched. So one of my favorite phrases is people by people, not ideas.
Absolutely.
And so it's how you pitch. So, in change management, you have to unfreeze an organization to get them to accept an idea to then refreeze at the other end with a new process. But you've got to take them along the journey. You can't just, you might be really inspirational and know what needs to be done, but you can't just bomb drop it on somebody. It doesn't work like that. You have to bring them up to speed to your ideal way of thinking. And that applies in most things, in career, changes and doing multiple things, convincing someone you can do something else, but you have to bring them along that journey. You can't just tell them, and that takes time and effort, and not everyone wants to put that time and effort in to do something like that.
Yeah, and in some cases it's worth that time and effort. In other cases, you may know upfront that what, it's not even worth it.
Yeah, pick your battles, absolutely. Yeah.
Right, choose the right ones. Yeah. And tell me another thing. If you were to look into project like 5, 10, actually no. If you look at the generation of your kids as they're growing up, and it's going to be a very different world when they hit the market, the so-called market. What do you think is going to be the landscape in your opinion? Whether it's in the industries that you know best, of course, or maybe also just in general. How do you, and what would you recommend to them, as they grow and become?
Again, I think it will be, the first thing will be what's your driving force is always my first thing. You have to do what you do for a long time. Even if you do multiple things, you still have to survive. So is your driving force money, or is your driving force really super enjoying what you do? Rarely do the two things go hand in hand. I think that's a bit of a thing that's kind of cropped up. It's like people don't want to do jobs they don't like, but they still want to do something and earn lots of money. And those two things aren't always, compatible. So find out what it is that drives you, that makes you happy, and then pick that road. But it's going to change. Google is now looking at not caring about college degrees. They're looking at 6-month certificates, right? Where it's more vocational. I think the old university system is just that. It's an old university system. It applies to certain professions, but for many it doesn't. And vocational training on the job makes a lot of sense. Being in the sector of maintaining up and coming technologies is going to be huge. It's like everyone thinks AI is going to take jobs away, but you need someone to run AI, program AI, do those kinds of things. So, that's definitely a sector to be in. It's I read a lot of Yuval Harari. Do you know Yuval Harari?
Yes.
So Sapiens and Homo Deus and 21st 21 Lessons. So I read a lot of that kind of stuff, and so the future is going to be very different. I think the issue I see in the COVID at the moment, I think, as bad as it is, offers a very unique opportunity, where I've seen people complain because the city centres of places are dying, the shops aren't open, but what that's opening the door to is decentralized, economy, and all of the coffee shops and places outside the city are doing much better. It's moving away from this old model of everyone's got to get on a train and travel 2 hours to go to the centre of London to do their job, travel 2 hours back. We've got this opportunity to change. The schooling system is based around parent 9 to 5 workday, when all studies show kids don't learn that well at that time, particularly teenagers, and so there's this huge opportunity to change things, complete way of operating, but the establishment want to go back to the way things were. When can we get back to normal? I just think we're missing a beat. This is just the time to change, So I think there will be some change in companies like Google and Amazon, those forward thinkers. They'll be the ones that change it. Amazon's going into healthcare. They're making their
Yes,
own,
I saw that actually recently on the news. Yes,
company.
Yes.
Yes. So I think it'll be slower than we want, but it'll change.
Definitely, and it's super unpredictable too. So I think also to help people kind of rebuild and I think redevelop a little bit the critical thinking skills that have been put a bit to the side, I would say, in the sense we've been so busy in getting expert in something, in a certain domain, in a certain area, that we've kind of forgotten as well to use our brains and our minds to think critically. Does this make sense? Does this not make sense? Do I really need to learn this and know this, as opposed to maybe there's going to be an AI program that's going to be much quicker than I am in processing this information. So we talk a lot about programming, and programmers are having a great time nowadays. I mean, everybody's looking for them with different languages of programming. But the future may have these already machine learning capabilities of machines are able to kind of program themselves through their own algorithms. It's kind of like they can also learn. So how can the human continue to stay relevant? And I do think critical thinking, creativity, being able to connect the dots and being able to have this relational aspect, as well as a nomadic mindset of saying, you know what, today I'm this, tomorrow I can become something else.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in pharma, I'm part of a think tank group, and there's a big shift towards patientless trials, where AI will compute how effective a drug's going to be based on thousands and thousands of other trials and data and understanding in the patient characteristics, and a predictive model. And so now they're doing this where they're running these AIs to see if they can get the same outcome as previous trials. And if they can, then there's the precedence for reducing the number of patients you have to expose to a drug. And that's huge. The FDA are even looking at this,
Yes.
So
that will happen. And probably animal testing too, no?
Yeah.
I would imagine there must be some predictive models on that front that, don't require sacrificing. I'm sorry, but I have a particular view on that. But testing drugs on animals, but there's probably going to be a better, more effective way of doing that, which is just as safe and reliable, I would hope, right?
Yeah. So
Fantastic. So a couple of more questions, if I may, Dr. Gareth. Doctor, the topics of your science fiction books, I mean, I'm kind of pivoting, and this is my curiosity.
Sure.
Also the other questions, but I do think it's very much related into what we were talking about, the world of work, and kind of like shifting gears and thinking on this multiplicity of talents and how to change them into professions. Now, your talents in writing and the science fiction part of it, how does that come to be? And I noticed some of your books, although I haven't bought them yet, but I promise I will by the time for the monster, that one.
Sure.
You also have quite a few female characters in your books that are pretty, like in this last one seems to be pretty assertive. Let's
Yeah,
put it this
sure.
way. Strong personality. Tell me a little bit about.
On an Israeli soldier. Yeah,
Oh, there you go.
yeah, yeah. I mean, so the themes we, particularly Stu and I, but me on my own, I tend to try and tackle topics that are poignant, or so, and it doesn't always get you good reviews. Some people really don't like it. But like the Children of the Fifth Sun series are all based on alternate history. So there's a lot of holes in our history that we still don't understand yet. There's a guy called Graham Hancock who writes a lot of his stuff. Fingerprints of the Gods is one of his books, all about how certain things don't add up. So Children of the Fifth Sun was about, well, there's very shortly lots of things that add up in history. You've got on every continent on the planet, you've got a single myth. It's called the flood myth. The big flood came and destroyed civilization. Okay, and on every continent, it's the same myth, and it's almost described the same way. That after the flood came a race of knowledge bringers, and they're always described the same way. They're pale, they're bearded, and they're from the sea. And this is a time when there was no intercontinental travel. It's really strange. It doesn't matter where you go, this myth exists. So I did a bunch of research, and it turns out, that myth exists everywhere, but also that the translations are off. So bearded actually was a mis translation of a Spanish word that actually meant feathered. And so I looked at all these things, and I looked at all of the drawings and everything, and I for the purposes of the book, I said, well, what if this race of knowledge bringers wasn't human? What if it was something that evolved elsewhere on Earth? And so the book is about that. It's about that they existed, we killed them off as humans, as we do, and then we find a corpse in Siberia frozen, someone clones it, and then all hell breaks loose, and they're fighting over this. But so there's kind of that big action thing going over that. But at the core, the main character suffered a tragedy. He lost his wife and child, and it's about him getting over it and being manic depressive and suicidal, and how he deals with that. And that's actually the story of the book. There's always action over the top of it. In children, It Takes Death to Reach a Star, we wanted to explore science and religion. So I'm a scientist, I'm an atheist, and my friend Stu is a Christian. He's from the southern states of the USA, and we wanted to explore those two things and write two opposing characters and not answer a question, not provide the answer, but give enough debate in there about what does it mean? What is a soul? Does a person have a soul? And I used quantum physics in the book to explain what a soul might be, and he used religion for his character. And it won a bunch of awards. We went up against Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian, so
fantastic.
It's always about character and dealing with things. Condition Black, the two characters in that one, my character is autistic. My son's autistic, and I wanted to write a character not about autism, not a journey, but more just this is a character. He happens to be autistic, and that's it. And Stu's character has got PTSD, and it's just about how they deal with all this action and science fiction and thriller, whatever. But it's just about how they as people deal with it. So, for me, that's always the core. It's the character, the base, dealing with stuff we all have to deal with.
Right. So it's interesting. It's like real life, if you will, the common people characters, so to speak, projected into a different reality. Right. But that's so revealing, that as much as the context around us may change, and like Elon Musk wants us all to go to Mars and and have human settlements there, but at the end of the day, it's still the human. And as fascinating as we are, and complex as we are, so it's nice to portray it and showcase it in different contexts, because like this, it doesn't necessarily trigger other excuses. That it could be a political view or religious view, or contextualize to history or to current affairs. But then I think taking science fiction to that level, it helps to kind of, as I said, detach it from any context that may or may not influence that individual's existential questions or dilemmas or even ways of being.
I mean, science fiction is the way the general public get to view the future. So if you read, again, Yuval Harari, his book 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, he has a section dedicated to science fiction. And he says the issue is you get a lot of bad science fiction. That's why everyone thinks AI is going to take over the world and kill everybody. Whereas good science fiction is predictive, and it gives you a window to what could be possible, what may happen, good or bad. Interestingly, It Takes Death to Reach a Star that we released in 2018 is about what happens after we ignore the rise of an antibacterial plague that wipes out most of humanity. And the things that have come true now in COVID times that we wrote about a few years ago are scary. It's scarily accurate. We didn't expect that. Down to the tribalism of people. So a lot of dystopian stories have rich versus poor, and ours isn't like that. Our poor people band together in tribes and don't like each other because that's how humans are.
Yes.
So yeah, it was weird to kind of be in this time now thinking we wrote this a few years ago.
How does it end?
Yeah.
That's the question. What's your ending?
Different, but yeah.
Okay, so I guess folks buy the book, and we're gonna live through this COVID and see how this is gonna end. But for sure, it's going to end at some stage, right? A couple of last thoughts, like what are your, to get to know you a little bit better. What's your, if you want to share, right? Your worst nightmare or your greatest hope, and kind of like what's wowing you at the moment. That's part of the wow tradition. Actually, asking guest speakers to tell them, because it's all about bringing the wow back to work. I mean, I've met so many people who are kind of like disengaged where they are at the moment.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're spending so much time at work. It's so important to bring that spark back. So at least what's wowing you is something that I always find inspiring also for other folks.
At work, I would say it's, we watch the pharma industry, and I know lots of people think it's an evil thing, and there's lots of reasons for that. Some of them are historical and valid, but Pfizer managed to get a vaccine out inside 9 months, and as a scientist and someone who's worked the bench and who knows how these things run and how long a trial takes, that was phenomenal. And that was really, that was impressive. It was crazy fast. That's what happens when people put their minds together. And I imagine all the late nights that people work to make that happen, and the data checks and the rigor that goes into a trial to make it, safe, and that we are happy to give it to human beings is massive. So that for me was a huge wow. I think that makes you glad about what you do.
Yeah. And I think people tend to underestimate that, the ones who are not necessarily in the industry or know how it operates and the whole supply of it. I mean, it's the whole supply chain process. From production to getting those vials where they need to be. It is massive undertaking, massive.
Particularly for that vaccine, because it's got a -80 cold chain, or at least a very low temperature, -60 something, -80. And that didn't exist in large parts of the world. You have to create it. That's a big deal. And, they're doing their best. It's not perfect, but we had nothing. We went from 0 to 100 really fast, and I think there needs to be some appreciation for that for sure.
And we've got 3 of them coming up, right? We've got, so that's pretty extraordinary too. And I think there's been quite a few partnerships on the pharma side to make this happen, which is a great way of starting to kind of break those barriers a little bit and kind of say, let's own this together, as opposed to it's only our, let's say, property, so to speak, or patent. Well, thank you very much, Gareth. It's been fantastic to talk to you.
Happy to help. Happy to be here.
And to share your story. And looking forward maybe to a next time. We'll talk more about your books. Who knows? When it becomes a TV series on Netflix.
Yes, absolutely.
Don't forget me. I mean, don't forget the wow.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Thanks, Gareth. Take good care.